And I think that says recording there. Yeah, perfect. All right. Oh, I meant to ask you. You want me to do your full first name?
No, you could just do Show Baraka.
Fantastic, because I'm afraid I'll mess it up. So, all right. Show Baraka. You don't know this. I've been listening to your music. There was something about pianos.
Pianos and politics.
Yeah. Since then, Spotify said you might like this, and then since then I have. Yeah. You don't know that.
Thank you,
I don't think yeah, absolutely. Hit that follow button and make you some, what, half of a cent per stream, something like that.
A couple times.
That's more than half a cent. But welcome to the show, man. I'm glad you're here, and thanks for your patience and on the fly, I think on your book birthday, having to cancel on you. So I apologize for that. But thanks for being here this morning.
Oh man, it's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm excited about the conversation.
So not everybody is watching the video, and not everybody will be familiar with you because Spotify has not yet recommended your music to them. And I have a couple of tracks that people, if you want to email me, I'll say, listen to these, because you'll laugh and then you'll also be really angry. And that's a good place, I think, for art to leave people.
I want to ask you what those songs are. Those two.
I'll have to pull them up. I don't have them memorized, but I do have them favorited, like in a playlist.
Got you.
Yeah. You got me off track. So when people, no, you're good. So what are you? Who are you? Why are you? Like, what are the things that you think are matter?
Yeah, I am. To make things easy, I just call myself a polymath or Renaissance man, because I do a lot of things from music to writing to, I don't like the term activist, but I guess you can say an activist. I study film and television, so I do a lot of work either behind the camera or in front of the camera. Husband, father, autism dad. And why I'm those things is I had parents who found that art was important, so they put certain poets and literature in front of me at a young age. Kind of shaped who I was. But then I had older brothers who were huge into hip hop, and so that kind of cultivated this love and affection for making rhymes through music, not just through the written, like through poetry. But hey, how can I put these two words together and make this sound real cool? And then my parents also were part of the Black Panther Party. Well, my mother was. And so that's kind of cultivated in me this desire for justice and to be concerned with people around me. So that's where the activism comes from, if you will. But I grew up in outside Los Angeles. So Hollywood, my aunt worked in Hollywood, worked on a set of shows that some of these folks may not know, but like 227 and Give Me a Break, Nell Carter, and some other ones. So and so being around sets and seeing shows being made just created this indelible, like this molding of wanting to tell stories through visual mediums. So that's kind of like who I am now, where I am. I also taught at a couple universities, hip hop through our religion, politics, and through hip hop. I can do this for all days, and I'll bore people to tears. I guess you could say I'm pretty dope.
Well, so that confidence there. So I have a question. So because you got to prepare for these things. I went onto your Instagram, and I found some of your Thursday thoughts. And being that you are pretty dope, I found one from a few months ago, because it doesn't look like you've done these in a while. But then again, you've been launching a book, and I'm sure you've done 9 billion podcasts, because that's how book tours happen now anymore. So, and thanks for being here for that. But there's a Thursday thought, one of your last ones that I watched. And there's a couple, someone watches, some on this, and I will say you've got quite the watch game. I just changed my watch face on my Apple Watch because that's cheaper. It's free. But that's fine. You can keep buying. But you have on there that you understand the plight of women because you were hit on by a 6 and you're a 9. And since you're dope, I just kind of wanted to know, like, how do you range that scale between 6 to 9?
Yeah. There's a lot of different elements. There's a lot of variables you got to consider. So my wife, on her off days, she's an 8. And I'm not just saying that because she's my wife. If she was here, I would, she's definitely a 9. But on a bad day, she's an 8. Um, but I tell her, I say, ma'am, I just want to let you know, you go to Walmart and you're upset that men are hitting on you. And I was like, you got to understand, 8s don't go shopping in Walmarts. And so sometimes you got to understand, like, it's not just how you look, it's how you carry yourself as well. 8s go to Whole Foods, they go to Targets. So it's also like the type of way you carry it. No, I'm just playing. No, I I don't know. I mean, I just have a little fun. I say some ridiculous things that I think have some truth in it, some things that I would love to put out there and just create discussion. As you kind of communicated earlier, I think the way that art, comedy, it disarms people. It gives the opportunity to say some things and to present some ideas that may not be easy to transmit in a lecture, or if it is easy to transmit in a lecture, it's not as palatable for people to consume because it doesn't have a nice melody behind it, or it's not metaphorical or allegorical, and so therefore people are able to wrestle with these concepts in different ways. I was recently talking about Nathan and David, how Nathan totally sets David up for this conversation. Nathan knew where he's going. Nathan knew he was going to rebuke David for his actions with Bathsheba and the killing of Uriah. But Nathan said, you know what? Instead of me just coming out calling him a disgusting bastard, you know what I'm saying? What I'm going to do is I'm going to share this story with him. And he's going to connect to this story. And he's going to be like, man, that's ridiculous. That person should be punished. And he's like, well, that's you, David. And in a lot of ways, that's what you do with art. Whether you're making, you're talking about beauty, me being a 9 and getting hit on. Or if you're talking about war, if you're talking about violence and justice, you're saying, like, how can I put the listener in this position so that they see themselves? Very similar to what Jesus did with the Pharisees as they were going to stone, or the religious leaders as they were going to stone the prostitute. It's like, look, y'all out here doing the same stuff she's doing, but you've created laws so that you can avoid the punishment. And so if you are better than this young lady, then go ahead and stone her. And they realize, like, no, we're in the same predicament. And so art does that. Storytelling does that.
What would your wife say that you are on your bad day?
I would like to think that she would say that I'm an 8, but I'm gonna have to go down to I'm gonna have to go to a I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go 6 or 7. I would like to I would pray and hope to God that she wouldn't say a 6, but I can deal with a 7.
He came on here. Show came on here to talk about a book.
Yeah. The crazy thing is she's not going to give. I don't think she's going to give me a 9. I think she's going to say I'm an 8. If you pinned her down and you said, no, I think she would give me a 9. I think she would give me a 9. The only reason why I'm not getting a 10 is because I don't have the body of like a Michael B. Jordan. And so if I had that, I would be a 10 easy.
If you got that contract though to be Apollo Creed, I'll bet you would. You put in the work. Oh,
that's a 10. She would probably give me an 11 after that. She'd be like, I don't care what your body looks like, sir.
Great on a curve.
Exactly.
All right. So you wrote a book. The name actually, he saw that it was good. That's right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I have your book digitally. So my notes are also digital. I don't mind reading books that way. I prefer a physical book, but that's all right. So I want to walk through some of that. And then I always like to end with a few existential questions, which I feel like based on what you said you do, that will be fun. So you start the book. I think the first word you say, maybe it's not the first words, is hello, average. Let me introduce you to awesome. What is average for a normal American or for a normal Christian, especially maybe in a different context? Like, because that sentence struck me. I literally highlighted it and I read it again. I've started saying it at work, which makes me come off as arrogant. And I don't care. But I just want to begin by ripping that apart a bit, and then maybe we can get into some of the practice and some of the theology of the book and some other questions that I had from the book as well.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I think that's a great. I think honestly, if I'm not stretching here. I think the book, in a lot of ways, is addressing that posture. We'll get probably into the weeds of this statement, but I think um, there's a lot of Christians out there who go to work on a to a 9 to 5, and they don't see themselves as God kind of instructed us to wake up and look at the day as a void and to speak life over that void. And therefore, we create life, we cultivate, we bring goodness into the world. And at the end of the day, God said it is blessed. He said it is good. So he blesses it. And I think oftentimes we go to work with this apathy, with this sense that my work doesn't really matter. I'm not really contributing to any real substantive change. And so for me, what I want to do is to remove that sense of apathy from people, because that produces average, that produces mediocrity, not in the sense of just how you approach work and the effort you give, but your theology. And if your theology is very average in the sense that God doesn't really care over this, then you don't see your work as worship. You don't wake up and go to it every day thinking like, even if my work doesn't directly tie to some social good, like working at a hospital or feeding, the homeless. The reality is the fact that you work in itself is worship, and you should approach it like that because you're creating something that is a reflection of what you believe about your creator.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
hopefully you're saying, hello, hello greatness, or hello average, let me introduce you to greatness. Or, you're just, it's not only a proclamation to your own self, but it's a proclamation to the world.
Yeah. Do you think that everyone is an artist and what they do is a vocation, or is artists set aside as a different vocation?
Yeah, I would say I would agree with the latter. I would say the artist is a vocation. However, I think everybody creates. Everybody is they cultivate. They're part of this idea. So when I think about creating, I think about Genesis 1:26-28, where God says, subdue the land, multiply it, etc., etc. And so therefore, what I see, one of the main directives from God to humanity is to be a part of creating, producing, or cultivating the raw materials that God has given us. And everybody does that. There's not one person who doesn't participate in the cultivating of something, which means we build systems, we build societies, we build culture. And so if sin corrupts that, then ultimately what we're saying is Jesus is calling to redeem those things.
Mm,
And so,
mm,
yes, I would say, however, um, no, artist is a vocation, but I would say every vocation creates.
yeah. Um, Point of clarification, because I can't remember from the book. So you talk about where is it at? I've got my notes here digitally. Here we go. So there's a part where you're talking about you look good in red. And I'm sure because a couple rings, that's like the first chapter. And so most people I think that read books for book interviews don't read the full book. And so I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot. I have questions from the end of the book too, because I refuse to talk to someone if I haven't read the full book.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about a book,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
but I want to approach the question from a different way. So, in look good in red. I know your dad, because Google says things was like a football player in New Orleans, right, for the Saints
Yep.
or maybe for somewhere else. Yeah. So, are you wearing red in certain neighborhoods or communities, especially the community I grew up in, Texas, will cause some issues, and I think you allude to that in the book. But where are you at in your life? Like, how old are you
Right now?
during? Yeah, no. When you're
Oh,
learning to embrace that color.
I was I think I'd say I think I was 7, 8 years old around that time.
So that's still in LA or that's in
Yeah,
Louisiana?
it's Southern California.
Yeah, because the level of don't wear red escalates, I think, from LA maybe to Louisiana.
Oh no, it's no, it was this is so I grew up like around, the Snoop Dogg his early years, before right when Tupac got shot, and NWA was kind of falling apart, but they were still hyped. So you had gang violence was everywhere, and it was popular. Colors, Boys in the Hood, movies like that. So yeah, even if you didn't live necessarily in Los Angeles, there were
Yeah,
particular neighborhoods you lived in, and you knew what colors you could and could not wear.
yeah, Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And I had different colors being out in West Texas, with
Yeah.
different environment, but same thing.
Oh yeah.
So no, you talk about the impact of what we leave as inheritances and like inheriting the impact of embracing different things. I'm curious though, what do you think you and or we as a nation or as a country or as a church or as take that wherever you want are leaving for the next generations and probably not even really your kids like I mean like your grandkids like what are we currently participating in and what do you think we're leaving for the next ones?
Mm. I think we are leading. I think this is a very successful and rich nation. So I do think we're leaving people financially. We're leaving people in some sort of economic wealth, but however, I do think we're leaving people socially bankrupt,
Mm,
spiritually bankrupt, though. So there's a lot of resources that we know we have as a nation. There's opportunity like never before for all people. Um, some opportunities are easier than others, are easier for others than they are for certain people, but there's no reason why a particular person in this country can't succeed, especially in comparison to other countries. That's because this great country has, its great wealth for all of its problems. There are great opportunities and roads to get to these places. It's easier for people if you have connections and who you know, and the kind of families you grow up, where you live, what type of neighborhood you come from. However, no matter where you are, no matter if you're of the, you're rich, middle class, lower class, I think we're handing down a spiritual deficiency that I think not only is caused by our political conversations, but I think social media has created a society that really wants things now without. So we want to give people a lot of information without giving people a lot of wisdom.
mm,
And I think until there's some sort of like social media revolution, political, I don't know, like not revolution in the sense that it needs to be violent, but a revival of sorts that will cause people to remove themselves from the extremes of our political discourse to a more rooted place. I'm just not sure we'll ever. I'm not sure our grandkids will be in a place where they can sift through nuance.
mm.
That they'll be courageous enough to speak against things that their best friends may hold to that may be wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because right now, we measure ourselves, we categorize or label ourselves against our opposition for the most part. And I don't think that's a place or a posture that we should ever be. That we shouldn't know what we're just against and just have anti-vision. We should have vision and we should know what we're for, and we should hold to ideas not based on who else holds them, but off the merit of its principles.
Huh. I don't know how to do that. I,
Yeah.
I don't know. I know how to do that in person because it's almost required to be in community. I don't know how to do that with social media. And it's not Clubhouse. That's the latest revolution, but it's
Mm,
definitely not Clubhouse. I haven't even tried it, but I'm sure that it's not Clubhouse. But
yeah.
I don't know how to do that. Um,
I think it takes. So in my book, I talk about heroes and villains and how there's no such thing as, well, yes, there. How oftentimes we think of as individuals as fixed heroes and villains. Like if a person's a hero, they're always a hero. If a person's a villain, and the reality is that's not the case. People put themselves in situations to be heroes or villains, and oftentimes we can fluctuate or vacillate from a hero to a villain. The one thing I say is that, and I truly believe this, is I think people wake up with the audacity to say, you know what, today I want to make decisions that's going to put me in a position to help other people.
yeah.
And David is very similar. David woke up at times where he was like, I am going to put myself in this position to have courage and fight for people who are on the margins. But then there were times when David was like, I am going to wake up this morning and I am going to have sex with this beautiful woman.
I want that because I'm a 9 and she's a 10.
Exactly. Because David, I'm pretty sure David was a 10.
When
And
you're the king, you're
Bathsheba,
the 10 because you're the king.
yeah, and Bathsheba have to be a 10 because if you saw it from the distance and you saw that, oh, that's a 10.
Uh, oh,
And to
gosh.
have the courage to bathe outside knowing that people are going to see you, that's got to be 9, 10 stuff. That's 9, 10 stuff. I don't care what time of life you live. Because if you're ugly, you're concealing yourself.
You're not on, yeah. Um, uh, so you didn't necessarily talk about this specifically in the Bible, but I'd like to rip it apart. And you use the word
The
vacillate, and
Bible.
because no, not the Bible, no, in your book, sorry. And you see, I got all excited about using a big word because I'm gonna steal it from you. So you don't know this show, but I transcribe these episodes, and so when people use words like vacillate, I already am wondering how it's spelled, but I know what it means, and so I'm gonna do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There's like throughout the book, you weave a narrative of, we are good, especially how you close it. Like there will be a day that redemption doesn't even need a name anymore because we're all good. But at the beginning here, I think it's in Good Call chapter 2. Like, I'm curious your thoughts. I see you weaving a narrative of goodness and then intentionally choosing a brokenness, you and I, and choosing that and helping to create like a hell here on earth, which the inverse is also true, which is what you just alluded to. We can make decisions that create the kingdom in partnership as creators, not necessarily artists. But I'm curious, where do you stand on like original sin type doctrine, which isn't really spelled out in the book? Because I see you writing from both sides of that without really choosing a stance, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense at all.
I try to be careful because I'm not a theologian. I've spent enough time in seminary to be dangerous.
I just read books.
Yeah. So both and yeah, I've read a lot of books, and I'm that kind of person who reads enough books that I can say something that is totally dangerous because I kind of get the concept, but I don't know it all. I don't comprehend it all the way.
Mhm.
So I try to stay away from like spelling out with being authoritative around particular tenets
Mhm.
of faith. Now, however, my personal belief is that I do believe in original sin in the sense that humanity was created good, and we've fallen, and we're trying to figure out how to get back to a place of goodness, but we'll never be wholly good, as you will, as we were, better yet, in the garden. But I am of the philosophy, the human philosophy, that humans are terrible people. And I'm not shocked. Like, I tell people this all the time. Like, if, for instance, if my neighbor next door murders his wife, and then all of a sudden the news comes to me and they say, "Could you believe that your?" I'll be like, "Yes, I can. I can believe it.
I met him.
I'm not shocked. I met him, and he seemed like a great guy. But you know what? I know what people do when they get upset and they get angry. And so I am more shocked that he hasn't killed her yet. If anything, so it's more of that. Like, I look at the world, I look at the depravity. I'm never shocked by the propensity of human depravity that ranges across our nation, across the globe. I go to India, and we talked about India off camera. You see caste systems. You go to South Africa. It's not just the effects of apartheid, but before that, you see the violence between Xhosa and Zulu. You in Rwanda, Hutsi and Tutsi. In my own neighborhood, you have gang violence, but then you have this national, systems of oppressions that have been rampant through our society. And so, I mean, you go to Ireland, you see Protestant Catholic. I mean, my thing is, you don't need race, you don't need religion, you don't need social status to hate somebody. All you need is another human being in close proximity, and you'll find a reason to dislike them. And so that's kind of like my view of humanity. But I guess the opposite of that, the opposition, or not the opposition, but the resolution, is somewhat of a Christian humanism that I'm trying to give. Is like, how do we learn to treat each other better? How do we learn in the tension of knowing that I am going to move next door to somebody who probably looks different than me, grew up different than me, has a different religion from me? How do I still find a way to love them, even if I never proselytize them to the faith, to the social sensibilities that I have. I got to figure out how to live in peace with this person.
Mm.
And this is a lot of what I'm trying to communicate in this book.
Yeah. Can you walk me through what the concept of a chocolate hill song is? Like, what is that? See, that's when you know I actually read all of the book.
That is, yes. See, look, you've earned some points right there. So I talk about going to a church that was a minority-led church with the intention of trying to be multicultural, multiracial, and multicultural, and in some senses multi-economic, diverse in its economic status as well, because it was in the middle of the city. So you had like, you know, communities that were considered projects or lower income, but then you also had like literally $1 million homes right next door to the projects. And so this is in Atlanta, by the way. And so in the city, you have these people, white, Asian, and Latino, coming to this predominantly Black church. And the philosophy of the church was, how do we create music that can bring everybody together? And so one of the philosophies was, well, let's just take songs from like Hillsong, let's take songs from like Bethel, different people like that, but jazz it up a little bit, give it a little bit of funk, give it a little soul. And so
add some horns.
It's some horns, facts, a little bass line, rather than just a good electric or acoustic. Let's give that thing a little bass line. Let's put that thing on a 2 and 4 rather than
You know that we can't clap to that.
Hey, well, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn today. And so basically I learned I started calling it Chocolate Hill Song as a way to talk about how these Black folks tried to give Hillsong a little thank.
Is there an album? Like I'll buy that.
No, but there's some. So you know, when we tried, but I would say there's two. You know, there's two. There's a pull up a Contagious Worship. It's some of those folks made a music, but then there's also Doxology, I think it's called. It's a band out of Philadelphia, church out of Philadelphia, and I would say they did the same thing. Those two albums are the attempts of trying to take this highly theological, thoughtful music
and put it on the 2 and 4.
And put it on the 2 and 4.
All right, so you write a couple stories in here. Honestly, you should just make a book out of this. Actually, at the end of all this, I'm going to recommend a book that comes out in September too, because from what you wrote about prudence, which is what I want to ask you about, I think that you would really enjoy.
Before you go any further,
yeah,
I'll say this: you are I've done maybe 30, I don't know, maybe 30 interviews. It's probably not that many, but it feels like 30 interviews, and I'm not trying to like overdo. You are maybe the second person who's asked me, maybe the third person at the most, who's asked me about the fiction.
Is that good or bad?
That's amazing, because okay. I really want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are books with theology, but books with arguably parables mixed in the middle force you to. So when I read that, it forced me to reconcile what I read before and then made me pay attention to what I was reading further, because I'm assuming, yes, since you said you're an adjunct professor, I think is probably the word, yes, that you don't put a story in the middle of a classroom lecture if the story doesn't matter. It's not just you being like, you know what, I need to flex a bit. I know that I'm a recording artist and I could say what I want and just put it on Spotify, but no, I'd rather write it down. Yes. Because that's easier for some reason. I'm sure that that's not the intention. So I'm going to read this. Go with me. I'm probably going to read it wrong. Okay. So there is a story about prudence, and I'll let you rip apart whatever you want about prudence. And I want to talk about what the rodent says, and then I want to relate that later on to because you use the word prudence again, and I again have to assume that's not intentional, or that's intentional. But you say the rodent spoke rapidly, acknowledgments, revered judgments. Revered judges, we are in the process of a great renewal, so excuse what might be unpleasant to your eyes. We are growing, we are moving, we are building a future. If I had known our prudent friend was unwelcome or in danger, I would have assisted her myself. And then he talks about all these other things. Look at my reputation. I got money. I give away money, yada, yada, yada. But then at the end, you say you can't build dignity. And that's the part that I really want to rip apart, kind of whatever that metaphor and narrative is.
Right.
And then if you could, the other place that you use the word prudence is in, I don't know what the chapter is, but there's a part where you're talking about a song called Chapter 9 Jim Crow, which is actually one of the songs that makes me upset. The Kanye rant is another one that kind of makes me happy, and I don't know why. I don't know why. I think it's the cadence of the flow. It's slightly different than the normal cadence. But you write in there after you quote some of your own lyrics. You say, these words were used with prudence. And so are those ideas connected at all? Take that wherever you want to take it.
So I would love to act like they were, but no. Say no, those two. Give me about 30 seconds. I can figure out how to make them connect.
Yeah.
But no, I would say no. But I will say no. I would say no. They're not connected. But I forgot the other part of the question.
Yeah. So these the rat part, the rodent, basically saying you can't build dignity.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I asked that is my pastor did, I think 2 years ago, before COVID, so maybe 3 years ago, I don't know. Time's lost its measure. He did a sermon series on the minor prophets. It was 13 weeks. Summer was 13 weeks long. So this is great. It's already pre-planned. Most of these are 2 chapters, 3 chapters long. Let's do this thing. And at the end, I can remember someone in our church being like, you can't talk about our government that way. And he's like, I didn't say the word United States in any of this. And for some reason, in the words of the rodent, what I hear is, but look at me doing all these cool things.
Right.
Look, I did it. It kind of reminds me of Amos 5:23. Like, just so anyway, wherever you want to go with that.
So absolutely, exactly. Without over analyzing and over explaining the art, each rodent is a representation of a particular type of person. You can even say vocation, if you will, skill set. A particular class of people, and I mean class by like you got the artisan class, you have the business class, you have the academic, and so the rodent is a representation of a particular type of person. And oftentimes we look at the veneer of what they do as dignifying or redemptive, but it can often be very selfish. It can be self-serving and destructive. And so the council laid down some judgment in that oftentimes the construction of edifices that look like they're bringing dignity actually do the opposite because of the effects of that type of work and vocation. And so that story, and to your point, that story is placed in that particular part of the book for a reason, because I think I just came out of talking about good call, and then I'm going into justice, if I'm not mistaken. And so, which is good slaves, bad plantation. I want to make sure that I'm not making this up. Yep. So I it's in between a chapter that's talking about work and a chapter that's talking about justice. So I think it was very pertinent that I put it there, and that people can see themselves as they just read about what do you do, how do you work, how do you contribute, and how is this tethered to making other people's lives better.
Yeah. There's a part in there, again, I don't know what chapter it is because I'm screenshotting these things on the Kindle app on my phone. So you talk about that many Black evangelicals, and you also end up saying that most people that are Black evangelicals, unless I'm misremembering, really aren't Black evangelicals. That's just a label foisted onto them because there needs to be a label somewhere. See themselves as modern day recipients of Jeremiah's prophetic instructions to seek welfare of the city as exiles. And then you say that term needs to be ripped a bit apart. Now, most people only are familiar with Jeremiah 29:11, maybe 12 if you did the extra credit homework. So what are you getting at with that? And like, what would you mean when you define the word exile specifically for people living, here in the US, which you'd asked at the beginning, the people listening to the podcast, for the demographics. So the number one listener is actually your neighbor. So that's going to be awkward when he finds out that you assume he's killed his wife, and then in the United States is the primary demographic as well. But yeah, can you rip a bit apart that little sentimentality there about Jeremiah and the term of
Yeah.
exile.
So just a little correction. I do believe that so there are a lot of people who don't like the label Black evangelicals. There are a lot of Black Christians who don't like that. But my argument in a lot of ways is like I understand that. The underbelly of my argument is like I get it, and yes, to some degree, there's a legitimate argument there. However, if we're looking at evangelical in the sense in just the Bebbington definition of it, which I talk about there, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's Christ-centeredness, the gospel changes people, people change the world type of thing. Black churches, traditional Black churches throughout history are evangelical, and that white evangelicals can't just own that term by themselves. But today, evangelicalism has a different type of association to it. So therefore, there are a lot of people who are like, "No, don't call me an evangelical." But the reality is just like people call themselves Christians and do ridiculous things, you can't throw away the identity of what it means to be a Christ follower just because somebody else has said and done something that you don't like and don't want to associate with. So that's that. So Black folks should not be ashamed to call themselves evangelical because it's inherently not a bad label. Exiles. In the context of this particular chapter, Jeremiah is talking to people who are removed from their home and placed in captivity in Babylon. And he's telling these individuals, look, we know this is not the perfect situation for you. We know you would rather be in your homeland. But the reality is God has allowed this, and God wants you to be here, not only for your own personal flourishing, but this is what's crazy, but for the flourishing of the city, your oppressors, if you will. And that is a very difficult and hard truth. And tells them to marry off their children, to build gardens, to buy homes, to live and to flourish off the land, because in your flourishing, the city will flourish as well. And for those people who are Bible scholars or just familiar with the story, you understand that Daniel and the Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego exist during this time. So they take this prophecy or this prophetic posture to heart by saying, you know what, I am going to thrive in the culture. I'm going to learn, and Daniel talks about this in chapter 1. I'm going to learn the culture and I'm going to excel, and therefore you get high positions, and therefore because of those high positions you become a blessing not only to the city but to your people. And so as a clarion call to Black evangelicals who feel like this is not my home, I'm in a palace and I don't belong here, what I'm saying is, whether you decide to leave the palace or whether you remain in the palace, understand that you still have a responsibility to seek the flourishing, not only of your own well-being and maybe those people who are, directly connected to you culturally, socially, racially, if that's your thing, then also you have a responsibility for the flourishing of the city. And your ascension in the palace may be a blessing to other people. So I am just trying to create this challenge to folks that God doesn't place us anywhere just by happenstance. It's strategic. You are in the palace to be a blessing, like Joseph, like Moses, like Esther, like Daniel, and ultimately like Jesus. You condescend and you give your life as a ransom for other folks.
Yeah. So I have 3 questions left. None of them are actually about your book, because really we only get 5 or 6 questions in a podcast episode, which really is frustrating because I've probably got 15 other questions I want to ask. That's okay. So you have referenced David and Nathan. I don't even remember if I was recording when you referenced it earlier. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. Who are the Nathans today? Like some of those people that we should be paying attention to when they point at something.
My favorite person in all of the world right now is Dave Chappelle. And I love Dave Chappelle. I think he is brilliant. I think there's something about comedians that have the audacity to be able to speak to culture in a way that they don't care about being silenced. Because one, they operate in the ridiculous. So it's like people in a lot of ways, they're like, yeah, of course they're going to say that. But what I think, separates good comedians from exceptional comedians is their ability to operate in the ridiculous, but to communicate a philosophy and a truth that really that puts a pause into people, and it says, "Wait, hold up. There's some depth to what they just said." And so Dave Chappelle is honestly, he's a philosopher who he just
Mm.
happens to be funny to me.
Mm.
He's just a dude who you think you're having a conversation about, I don't know. Like one of my favorite jokes to this day is him talking about when he left Comedy Central, and he's trying to take no, he didn't leave at this point. He was saying, I was just going on a vacation to just, to Disneyland with my family, or Disney World with my family, and I'm just trying to take a break. And you think this is a joke about people invading his privacy, but at the end he talks about how he got so frustrated with Mickey Mouse and people like trying to make fun of him and use his own jokes against him that he punches Mickey Mouse. And you're like, what in the world? Why would you punch Mickey Mouse? And then he talks about how everybody around him is up in arms and is like irate because he punched Mickey Mouse, but not, well, how everybody's irate, not because he punches Mickey Mouse, but because Mickey Mouse is actually a Mexican underneath the costume. And it's like, that's the social commentary that he gives. It's like, we're more upset than the fact that Mickey Mouse is being portrayed by this Hispanic character,
and the fact that I punched him.
than the fact that I punched him and I abused Mickey Mouse, this icon, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's just funny. It's like, it's stuff like that, the layers of and anyway, so, but he's very vulgar, but as Richard Pryor said, and as I quote Richard Pryor, it may be profane, but it's also profound. You know what I'm saying? So I think folks like him, and I know you want to ask more questions, so I'll just leave it with Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, no, that's fine. His thing in some cornfield, I guess in Ohio or whatever, last year, like, yeah, I don't know. I like that. Dave Chappelle is not where I thought you were going. Also, I'm glad that you went with that punched story, because there are other comedy specials with Dave Chappelle where he punches other things and it's not as clean as Mickey Mouse. So I appreciate you going with that one, because my kids sometimes listen to this and I so
oh, yeah, you're right. There's a couple. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
It is funny.
It was the most brilliant setup too.
He's
he
clever.
told people where we were going to go, and then
in an hour and a half, this is where I'm going to be. And then when you get there, you're like, I told you.
I told you. Oh my gosh, the genius. But anyway,
he's great. All right. So I decided finally after years of doing this show that I should play on the name of the show. And it's become, I think you're maybe the third or fourth person I've asked this to. So what do you personally feel like are the things that we should be allowed to talk about at church? And that if we don't, will possibly be the demise of a portion of the life-giving part of the church?
I think it's a little too late right now, but I think sexuality is one of the things that we have failed. And so therefore we have a generation of people who don't trust the church anymore about what they have to say about sex or sexuality. And I'm not even talking about sexuality in the sense of, LGBTQ, etc. I'm talking about even healthy sex within marriage, healthy sex. Like it just seems like we can't, the only time we can talk about that is in counseling spaces or in marriage counseling or at marriage retreats. And I think this is politics, I don't know, marriage, and now maybe even politics, sex, and race are one of the most divisive, some of the most divisive things to talk about, but it's the things that people love the most. And I don't understand why we're so afraid to talk about these things. Many people love sex. People who are not even married are love sex, and they love engaging in sex. And we're acting like we can't talk about it. Teenagers are engaging in it, and oftentimes we just try to distract teenagers with, their favorite Christian rock band or Christian hip hop group, and act like as soon as they're done, they're not going to go out and hang out with their friends, and there's not going to be an attractive individual that they want to have sex with. And but to deal with that compulsion, just listen to your favorite rap group. It's like, and then, politics, again, we all have strong beliefs about what makes the world better for us. Why aren't we able to talk about that frankly and do it in a way that's charitable and learn from one another? Why are you anti-abortion? Why are you for abortion? and let's have a discussion about it. You know what I mean? And then we all love ourselves. And so that's the race discussion,
Mm.
even though it's a construct, but still, like, we built this construct in the sense that we build our identities according to these social groups. And I grew up loving this. You grew up loving that. Well, that pushes up against my sensibility. Well, let's talk about it. How can we make this world a better place so that you and I can both love the things we love? You can love your Southern culture, but not necessarily throw your Confederacy in my face. And I can love my Blackness and not feel like just because you are white that you're evil. You know what I'm saying? And so,
Yeah.
like, let's figure out how to have these sensibility, like these conversations, and be sensible about it. But the church wants to act like they're not real things.
Yeah.
And the more we talk about it, the more honest I think the conversations will be, and the less taboo it will, and the less offended we'll be by these types of things when they come up.
Mm. Yeah. When you try to wrap words around what God, the divine, whatever that is, what do you say to that if someone asks you, hey, what is that? What is God? What is that?
Oh, I'm ready for this.
I told you I end with the existential.
Yeah, I am very traditional in the sense when I just answer this question. I don't know if I can be very artistic. I've heard, Octavia Butler talk about God is power, basically.
Mm.
Like, and so that doesn't mean it's that he or she is a being. It's the very essence of controlling something and knowing you have that power and that control to change people's lives. That's God. I like to think of it being more embodied in an actual energy, an actual spirit that facilitates, controls, determines, but also allows things to happen, people to do. Um, and that person, that being, that energy, that spirit actually cares. And it's not just hovering without any kind of empathy, because I think everything, the nature cares, nature grows and gives, nature punishes. When things go wrong, you feel there's storms, there's viruses, like nature interacts, and it has it's an organism that lives and it moves and it has its being, it thinks. And to believe that those things didn't have some sort of intelligent interaction with something, to me feels like there's nothing that watches over us. I think that is, to me, very naive, and I feel like that thing is God. I don't know what gender it has. I don't know what it or he or she looks like. I just know that this is too beautiful of a design for it not to have been intentional. And
Yeah.
the way we operate and we think, we operate like gods. And so it just only makes sense that that complex didn't just come from the fact that we figure, you know what, somebody needs to control some stuff. I think that came from this idea that we are made from the very thing we want to emulate.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to answer the question you asked earlier. So the Kanye 2009, that's the name of the song.
Yes.
I've been playing it in the back of my mind, which makes it really hard to have a conversation. But all I keep hearing is go on, say it then, which is not the way that it's sang in the song. The lyric in there, though, that I relate the most to, where I like dialed in and listened, because I hate people named Sally and I hate people named May. And I also hate that I hate people named Sally Mae. But there's a part in there that you say something like something about you don't have enough money to solve problems, and influence doesn't stop Sally Mae from calling, and it's enough to drive somebody. I don't remember all the lyrics, someone into depression or something like that. But I literally stopped, rewound it. I'm like, that's why I got into what I do for a living, because I didn't go to school to do what I do now. But
Yeah.
Sally Mae's like, hey, a 6-month deferral. Hey,
We don't need that. I need that.
listen, I gave you some money. Wasn't quite a payday loan. I'm aware that you were 19 when we gave you like all this money and you didn't know any better.
And you didn't know any better, and it probably shouldn't have done it anyway, but still, that's how the system works. They allow me to do it. And guess what? Time for the payout.
And maybe I did or didn't buy like a Plymouth Neon, not even that Dodge Neon with the
But that's not the
extra
point.
money.
That's not my
Yeah,
fault.
yeah.
That's not the point.
I needed a car. So
I knew I needed a car.
yeah, I don't think it's your song, but the song that's spoken to me the most recently is We Know Entiende. I think it's Propaganda, and I don't know who the other guy is. It might be Swope. I'm not sure. He said the lyric is Jesus died in the blackest way possible with his hands held high or his hands held up and his mama there watching him or something like that. And it's just, it's not your song. Sorry, didn't mean to digress,
No,
but you'd asked earlier.
I know both of those dudes, and I love both of those dudes. So that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Where do you want people to go? Because they should buy the book. It's at Books a Million here in Stewart Straff, Waynesboro, Charlottesville area that I live in, and I have moved it. There's an end cap section there with a few other books. Most of them are also blue. I do the same thing for every author that's on here. Like I did this for Elizabeth Johnson. I've done it for Diana Bass. Like if I'm in the store and it's there, I move it to the front because, hey, it doesn't cost anything. I know in a few hours, some poor kid making $8 an hour is going to have to fix it, but that's all right.
But good. Hopefully in those hours, somebody's walked past and they saw this beautiful face and they were like, oh my God, that gentleman is strikingly gorgeous. That's
you could see, that's when you like Chappelle, because that's the callback. That's the
there you go. Callback. There you go.
I mean, there's no neon lights wrapped around you like you did a modeling shoot the other day, but I mean,
oh gosh, people. There's some people who have some interesting commentary on those pictures.
Where do you want people to go though, Show? Where do they do the things that they need to do to support what you're doing?
On all my platforms. My full name is Amisho, so it's AMISHO, Baraka, Baraka. So you'll find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at that particular handle. Barakaology is my website, and I have an event that's going to be coming up called One Good Night, and it's going to be a variety show. It's going to happen on June 26th, and I think
Chappelle's coming.
Yeah, Chappelle's going to be there. He's going to stop by. Just letting you know. I mean, I be on screen, but he'll be in the building. And but it'll be virtual and also in person. So just stay up on my media, social media, and you'll be able to enjoy some of the skits and short films and music that I'm presenting with friends. So it's gonna be fun.
That's fun. Hey man, I appreciate you being here, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, man.
Fun, bro. It was a fun time. You were a very fun interview, and I don't say that to everybody.
Well, I appreciate it. All right, so I will I need to end the recording.